All right, the mighty SEC, the premier conference in college football, depending on who you ask. But here's a conference that routinely puts, uh, always has a team in the college football playoff. A few years back, they had two, and they're always in the discussion to potentially have two. This year is going to be a lot like the last few years. Alabama, Georgia are going to be your top two teams, but I think some of those other teams are starting to kind of work their way up. Let's start in the East Division. I think this is Georgia's to lose. They've been kind of building. Jake Fromm's entering his third year. He's the true starter. They've got to replace some weapons on offense. They got to replace guys on defense, but they've been recruiting at an elite level, at an Alabama, at a Clemson level. So I'm not too worried about them replacing guys just because they're just getting these elite guys in every year. The division itself, last year we kind of started to see some teams come up. Florida, Kentucky were two teams that were top 15 teams at the end of the year. I don't know if that's going to happen again this year. Yeah, Florida is intriguing. I like Felipe Franks. He took a big jump last year under Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen's a good coach, but they haven't been recruiting at the Florida level lately. The offensive line has taken a big hit. Juwan Taylor was their star right tackle last year. He's gone. They just don't have the talent that they've been recruiting. It hasn't translated to that offensive line. Defensively, I think they've got some players. C.J. Henderson, their cornerback's one of my favorite prospects for the 2020 NFL Draft, but they've got to replace a lot of guys. Do they have those guys to come up? I think they're talented, but they've got a lot of drama kind of around the program. Can they overcome that? Kentucky is that other team that I talked about. I think they're going to take a big drop back. They lost so many guys. They had an elite talent level of defense last year. They had 3 or 4 guys get drafted out of their secondary. Josh Allen was a top 6 pick. Those guys are all gone. Do they have the guys to come up? And, history has shown that they don't have. It's not plug and play. Terry Wilson's back at quarterback for them, but they also lost Benny Snell. So I think Kentucky takes a step back. I think Missouri kind of rises a little bit. They've kind of got this team building, but they're not even eligible to play in the SEC championship game because of NCAA sanctions. So if Georgia doesn't win this division, something major happened and all-out chaos ensued. But it's Georgia's to lose, and I think they cruise easily to that SEC title game. On the West, I still think it's Alabama's division to lose. Year after year, they always lose these top high-rated players. You think, is their defense going to take a step back? Last year we're like, they lost, all these defenders, and all of a sudden this guy named Quinnen Williams came out of nowhere and just dominated. Who's going to be that guy this year? Raekwon Davis is back. He kind of fell into Quinnen Williams' shadow last year. They're getting Terrell Lewis back. Dylan Moses is a complete stud. I think he's the best linebacker in the Nick Saban era. They've had a lot of great ones. Reuben Foster, Dante Hightower, C.J. Mosley, Rashad Evans. Dylan Moses is the best. Watching all those guys, he can do it all. He's explosive. He can go sideline to sideline. He can come up and fill the hole with power. He can drop into coverage. He's got speed. There's a clip. I was showing a clip of a running back they played against, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Dylan Moses comes flying in to cut him off, and you're like, where did he come from? And he's just an absolute stud. So I think the defense will be fine. Offense, I think, is going to carry them. Tua is an elite quarterback. I think he's got number 1 pick overall potential. Jerry Jeudy has got top 5 receiver capabilities. Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle. The offensive line, they lose Jonah Williams, but they that's about it. So Najee Harris is back at running back. They're loaded. Yes, they'll have a tough division. LSU's good. A&M's good. Auburn will surprise probably. But I think Alabama's a team that's going to have go undefeated in the SEC championship game. Maybe they have one loss, but they're just too good not to get into that SEC championship game. I mentioned LSU. They are a team to kind of here's a top 10 team last year. I think they're going to be better this year. Joe Burrow's another year in the program. They did get Joe Barry as their he's not their offensive coordinator, but he's their passing game coordinator. He comes from the Saints. He's working with Sean Payton, so maybe finally we can get LSU's offense into the 21st century or whatever century we're in. But what do they have at receiver? Do they have some, running back? They seem like they have somebody always. Is that offensive line improved? Defensively, they get K. Levon Chason back. He's their star edge rusher. If you watch him on tape from a couple years ago, he's an explosive, big athlete. He was probably their best, one of their best defense, front seven guys last year, but he didn't get a play because of an injury. Suffered in the offseason. He's back, hopefully healthy. Can't wait to see him all year. Grant Delpit at safety. He's kind of that Jamal Adams, Derwin James type of safety, kind of a more physical, strong safety, but an elite athlete at it. So if Joe Burrows and that offense can take that next step, I think they can make a run at Alabama, but I still think talent-wise, they're a step behind. The team to kind of really watch here is Texas A&M. Here's a team that Jimbo Fisher, they're paying him a ton of money. He's been recruiting. We saw the team kind of taking steps, and they gave Clemson a run for their money and almost basically should have won that game last year. They've got a lot of guys returning. Kellen Mond, he's an intriguing quarterback. Watching him, they've got some talent at receiver. The defense is getting better. Justin Matabuke is the best defensive tackle you don't know about. And maybe if you do, then you know what I'm talking about. He, former defensive end, moved him to defensive tackle. He's gotten bigger, he's got power, but he still has a lot of those defensive end movements. I think he's a guy that really keep an eye on. I have him in my top 15 of my first NFL mock draft. So I think he's gonna be a fast riser. I like Texas A&M, but they just have a brutal schedule. They get Georgia. They have to play all the SEC West teams. They have to play Clemson. So they're basically playing 4 out of the top 5 teams in the preseason rankings. So I think they're going to be better, but they just have such a tough schedule that they have no shot to contend for the SEC West. I mean, they'll probably be the 3rd or 4th best team, but they'll be the best 3-loss, 4-loss team in college football. So Alabama, Georgia, going to the SEC title game. At this point, I think it's Alabama's to lose. I'm not counting Georgia out of the playoff, though.